This is Frederick Henry Royce, born in 1863 in Alwilton in England. Henry was the youngest of 5 children. His parents, James and Mary, ran a flour mill. James had followed in his father's footsteps, but he lacked business skills. Profits were meager, and for many years the Royce family lived in poverty. Things got worse, and in 1867 they had to file for bankruptcy. Hoping to carve out a better life for themselves, the family moved to London. By this time, the 4-year-old Henry already had his first job, a bird scarer on a local farm. His pay? 6 pence a week. Then, in 1872, disaster struck again. Henry's father passed away. Now, all the children had to chip in to make ends meet, including the 9-year-old Henry. He began selling newspapers and delivering telegrams. Henry's early years of poverty had a profound effect on him, and by the time he turned 15 years, he had completed only 1 year of school. As a young teenager, he began an apprenticeship with the Great Northern Railway Works. His aunt had offered him some financial support, and despite not having a formal education, Henry grasped every opportunity to educate himself, studying algebra, French, and electrical engineering in his free time. But after 3 years, he was forced to quit due to a lack of money. After quitting his apprenticeship, Henry briefly worked at a tool-making company in Leeds, and then for the Electric Light and Power Company in London. In 1882, he moved once again, this time to Liverpool, where he continued to work for the Electric Light and Power Company. His true ambition was to make engineering his full-time job, however. So at 22 years old, he started a business with his fellow engineer friend, Ernest Claremont. They named it F.H. Royce & Company, and for the next few years, they worked around the clock to make electrical components such as doorbells and dynamos. The company kept expanding, and by 1894, they were already making electric cranes too. But Henry's interest started taking him somewhere else: motor cars. While Henry Royce plays a vital role in the Rolls-Royce story, the brand's name suggests there's also another person that we shouldn't forget, and that person is Charles Stuart Rolls. Born in 1877 in London's affluent Berkeley Square, Charles Rolls was the youngest child of Lord and Lady Langattock. Having developed a passion for engineering from very early on, he went on to study mechanical engineering at Trinity College in Cambridge. Charles knew how to stand out, having gained a reputation for tinkering with engines. He earned himself the nickname Dirty Rolls. And during his studies, he was the first undergraduate to own a motor car after having traveled to Paris to buy a Peugeot Phaeton at the age of 18. At the time, this was extremely unusual, as most people hadn't even heard of cars yet. After graduating in 1898, Charles began working on a steam yacht and then at the London and Northwestern Railway. He was more interested in motoring, pioneering, and salesmanship, however, and with financial support from his father, he opened one of the first car dealerships in Britain in 1903. He named the company C.S. Rolls & Co. And for the next couple of years, he dedicated himself to importing and selling Peugeot and Minerva cars. Business was booming, and Charles used the money to fund his sporting activities. Besides being an avid motorist pioneer and racer, he was also an eager aviator, and as you can guess, both of these hobbies are anything but cheap. Unfortunately for Charles, however, his lifelong passion would eventually cost him more than just his money. When running his company, F.H. Royce & Company, Henry became increasingly interested in motor cars. In 1901, he decided to improve a second-hand 2-cylinder DeCauville car that he had bought, but he wanted more, and so he decided to build a car on his own. Henry had an instinctive desire for perfection, and having found construction faults in the DeCauville, he vowed to do better. By the end of 1903, he designed and built his first petrol engine, and by the next year, he drove his first Royce 10-horsepower motor car into town. By now, 2 decades had passed since Henry set up the company. His first car was a success, and so he set out to create another one, and another. Of the 3 cars that he had built, he gave one of his business partners, Ernest Claremont, and the other he sold to one of their shareholders, Henry Edmunds. and it was this Henry Edmunds who would eventually arrange the meeting between Rolls and Royce. Henry Edmunds was a shareholder in Royce's company and a friend of Rolls. After having bought one of Royce's cars, he began boasting to Rolls about it. At the time, Rolls was frustrated with only being able to sell foreign imports in his company, so Edmunds arranged a meeting. Little did Edmunds know that the meeting would change the future of motoring forever. While Rolls had always preferred 3- and 4-cylinder cars, Royce's 2-cylinder vehicle made a big impression on him. Within minutes of seeing it, he knew he had found what he was looking for. He took the motor car for a drive and agreed on the spot to sell as many motor cars as Royce could build. The two men made an unusual duo. There was not only a massive age gap, but also a class and education gap. For starters, Royce was 41 years old, while Rolls was only 26. The young Rolls had enjoyed a fancy education at the prestigious Trinity College, whereas Royce's skills were largely self-taught. And while Rolls had spent his young adult years racing around in his fancy cars, Royce had been working hard to make ends meet. Would they be able to see eye to eye? While Henry Royce and Charles Rolls were two very different people, they also made a great duo, and the massive success with the cars led to the creation of the Rolls-Royce Company in 1906. Then came the launch of the 6-cylinder Silver Ghost. Within a year, it was hailed as the best car in the world. Impressive! But for this, they also had Charles's partner to thank. Creating a brand requires vision. So while Henry and Charles were busy building and selling motor cars, it was Charles's partner, Claude Johnson, who took on the role of managing director. He knew it was vital to expand the company's reputation, and the publicity genius that he was, he orchestrated a series of stunts to promote the quietness and reliability of Rolls-Royce motor cars. One of his early adverts for the 40 to 50 horsepower motor car promoted it as the 6-cylinder Rolls-Royce. Not one of the best, but the best car in the world. With that ad, Claude introduced the phase that would forever be associated with Rolls-Royce. It was incredibly effective. It demonstrated Rolls-Royce's superior performance, and it created a global demand for their world-class engineering. And Claude was so integral to the company's success that he became known as the hyphen in Rolls-Royce. Of course, marketing alone will get you only so far, and both Henry and Charles dedicated themselves to delivering the best quality possible. But it was especially Henry who had a knack for pushing himself to the limit when it came to work. Henry was renowned as a hard worker who never ate properly. Unfortunately, these habits severely affected his health. But surprisingly, he would end up outliving his business partner Charles by a couple of decades. Over the years, daredevil Charles's interest in aviation kept growing. He even tried to persuade Henry to develop a design for an aero engine, but Henry refused. To continue living out his aviation dreams, Charles bought a Wright Flyer aircraft, with which he made over 200 flights. In 1910, he became the first person to make a non-stop double flight across the English Channel. But just 1 month later, everything changed. During a flying display at Bournemouth, Charles was killed in an air crash. He was only 32 years old. He became the first Briton to die in a plane crash, and his premature death meant the end of the short-lived Rolls-Royce partnership. Now Henry would have to continue their legacy on his own. Henry had an innate work ethic, and his innovative designs established Rolls-Royce's reputation for superior engineering and quality. He uncompromisingly persuaded his basic principle of establishing the best design with both the finest materials and the highest levels of craftsmanship. To put it in his own words, strive for perfection in everything you do. Take the best that exists and make it better. When it does not exist, design it. During the First World War, the company expanded into manufacturing something Charles had once requested: aero engines, and during the next couple of decades, the company did extremely well. Unfortunately, Henry kept struggling with his health, and in 1993, he succumbed to digestive tract problems. His death had been brought on by his early years of poor nutrition and a lifetime of overwork. He had spent much of the last years of his life as a semi-invalid, but that didn't stop him from working though. His never-failing enthusiasm and dedication to engineering prevailed, and he continued to work until the very last moment. Literally, his last sketch was made from his deathbed a few hours before he died. He was 70 years old. Rolls-Royce has remained a famous name in engineering. A Rolls-Royce is one of the most successful luxury cars that money can buy. And with over 130 dealerships spread over 40 countries, the brand is known far beyond Great Britain. Currently, Rolls-Royce is owned by BMW, and the brand is still primarily known for producing some of the most expensive cars in the world, such as the Rolls-Royce Cullinan, Ghost, Phantom, Wraith, and Dawn. Torsten Müller-Ötvös has been the CEO since 2010, and his reign has proven to be essential in the company's success. But it's the vision of Sir Henry Royce and Sir Charles Rolls that truly made Rolls-Royce what it is today. A symbol of pure and unadulterated wealth. Something tells me the two men would be proud. Had you already heard of the many people involved in Rolls-Royce's history? And what would you like to add to the story? Share it in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, then take a look at our channel for more inspiring business videos.